It's time for your daily dose of all things Chicago sports. This is the Daily Score. Now, here's your host, Mark Grote.
Hi there. I was talking the other day on this podcast about how I don't know that the Bears are serious about winning this year because they didn't really have a legitimate edge rusher. Well, guess what? Things have changed. The Bears are serious about winning because they have signed edge rusher Yannick Ngakoue to a 1-year, $10.5 million deal. The terms of the deal give credit to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network for this. And again, this says that the Bears are serious about winning. And we're not talking about Khalil Mack here or a guy that's going to have 20 sacks or be an MVP candidate or anything like that. But what Yannick Ngakoue is a steady, very steady NFL defensive end. He had 9.5 sacks last year for the Colts. He is just a absolutely consistent player. We'll get into some more of the numbers here in just a second, but I think the other thing that the signing of Ngakoue does is it puts everything else into line. There is order now with the Bears defensive ends because they did add new players this year, which in theory were expected to be improvements, like DeMarcus Walker, who I like, but he had a career year last year of 7 sacks. Does that number go up a little bit? But that kind of puts that in line right there. Shaquem Green added to the Bears front this year. 3.5 sacks last year, 6.5 sacks the year prior to that. And then you have some of the guys that you are hoping to develop, and they will continue to develop because this is just a 1-year deal for Ngakoue. So the Bears, to some degree, are still betting on guys like Dominic Robinson, who had a 1.5 sacks last year as a developing prospect who had never really played the position before. Trevis Gipson as well, who was a little bit of a mystery last year, really since 2021. He had 7 sacks in 2021, but even in that year, he started to fade a little bit. And then last year had a bad year. He had 3 sacks last year. So this might be the last call for somebody like Trevis Gipson. But to me, it's almost like a starting pitcher, like an ace starting pitcher that you add to your rotation, that all of a sudden everything else makes sense. And all of a sudden, Jamison Tyone makes sense, and Marcus Stroman makes sense, and Justin Steele makes sense, and all of that. Although, those guys make a lot of sense already, especially the Justin Steele part of it. Then you have the inside guys. Even to some degree, this puts everything in line for those guys. Guys like Justin Jones and Andrew Billings, who they just brought in this year. The 2 draft picks and Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens. It all makes sense to have Yannick Ngakoue on this team. Now, I made the point that this is just a steady NFL performer, not necessarily a wow performer, but a really good performer. Last year with the Colts, he had 9.5 sacks, like I told you. The year prior, 2021, he had 10 sacks. With Baltimore in 2020, he had 3 sacks, then traded to Minnesota for another 5 sacks. So 5 plus 3 is 5, 6, 8. 8 sacks that year. 2019 with Jacksonville, he had 8 sacks as well. 2018 with Jacksonville, 9.5 sacks. 2017, 12 sacks with Jacksonville. 2016 with Jacksonville, 8 sacks. You get the point. 65 sacks in his life. And, he's averaging anywhere between 8 and 12 sacks throughout his career. And like I said, not necessarily a game changer, but legitimate. This is a absolutely legitimate starting edge rusher on your team. I would imagine that they will link him up with, one side you're going to have Yannick Ngakoue, and then the other side, most likely at least the starter, and they will rotate in and out, is going to be DeMarcus Walker, I'm sure, with Shaquem Green probably starting on the bench to begin the games. The way we've seen it align in training camp for sure has been mostly if we are to assemble some sort of first string, it has been mostly DeMarcus Walker and Shaquem Green doing those things. Credit to Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles in his own way, and I think that my inferences from what Ryan Poles had been telling us on the first day of camp in regards to trying to sign an edge rusher, what I had inferred from everything he said is that he was definitely trying. One of the big things that he stressed on a couple of times, I think, here on the score, and even just when he spoke to us out at Hallis Hall in Lake Forest, was that the key phrase that he kept using was, it takes two. It takes two to make a thing go right. It takes two to make the deal happen. So in other words, Ryan Poles probably had made offers, or offer, if it was just one offer, and he was waiting for the other side to respond. It takes two, and sometimes these guys that are either that are free agents and they're waiting around, especially if they are veteran players and they've been through a lot, then they look at it and say, maybe I'll just miss the first week of camp, and maybe I'll hook up with the team once the preseason starts, because veterans for the most part hate training camp. I mean, they'll all acknowledge that it's necessary and they need it, but who likes training camp? I mean, it's hard. It's hard work. It's arduous. It's every day. It's in the heat. So I think it is fair to think that some of these guys wait. So it takes two, and two have done it, and the Bears have Yannick Ngakoue on their team. Now, something that keeps popping up and that we'll definitely be asking Ryan Poles and Yannick Ngakoue himself is that, when I went through all of the numbers, he's been on a lot of teams. He spent the first 4 years of his career with Jacksonville, but then in the last 3 years, Baltimore, Minnesota, split time with those two teams, Vegas, the Colts. So he keeps getting shuffled around. Was listening to Brad Biggs on the score, and Biggs said, according to his sources, that there are no character issues for this guy, because that's what you think. You think, is he like a bad locker room guy? And at least according to Brad Biggs, regular contributor on the Mully and Haugh show on Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score, that is not the case. So that sometimes that is the way of the NFL. Will Ngakoue get a long-term deal with the Bears? We'll see. I think one of the things that Ryan Poles also said before the signing was, it has to make sense to this team and what we are doing and what we are building and where we're putting our expenses. He said he does not want to do something now that will gratify everybody but hurt the Bears in the future. So that was important to Ryan Poles. So we have to believe that, in theory, this 1 year, $10.5 million deal is not going to hurt the Bears in the future. And then they will eventually this season have a big decision to make, depending on how well Ngakoue does play for the Bears. Will they give him an extension? And how much do they truly believe in the rest of their edge rushers? They're going to have some high draft picks next year, and that could be the year where they go after like an absolute baller of a prospect to bring in next season. So my gut instinct right now is that Ngakoue is a 1 year player, just based on everything he's said, that what Ryan Poles has said. And Ngakoue could blow everybody out of the water, and he could become a quintessential Bear. My gut is that this is a one and done deal for Ngakoue, because Ryan Poles has talked so much about developing their own guys, and that would potentially portend Ryan Poles doing a serious look next year in the draft, and maybe even in the offseason, in terms of just really bringing the noise as far as the defensive end is concerned. So looking forward to hearing from Yannick Ngakoue and Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and all the people involved in this terrific acquisition for the Bears. And eventually we'll definitely be able to give you some sound on that. I will be on Friday night on The Score from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. for a full hour of training camp live, and who knows, we may get to see Ngakoue in action. You may hear from him on The Score Friday night at 6:00, and I promise you'll hear it throughout the weekend and then all week on The Score. We thank you, as always, for listening to and watching the Daily Score. If you're just a regular listener, audio-wise, that's totally cool, but if you feel like you want to watch the podcast, we are on YouTube, and we invite you to be there as well. I also invite you to interact with me. You can always hit me up on any of the social medias. I hang out on Twitter at Mark Grote Sports, Instagram, Mark_Grote, and Facebook, I'm something. I don't know what I am on Facebook, but you could find me. Google me, Mark Grote. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will be talking to you soon. For our executive producer, Ray Diaz, I'm Mark Grote. Have a great day. Bye.